Hi everybody. For those that doesn't know me, my name is Natalia Bullón. I'm a YouTuber, and this is my channel. This is Aligerando mi equipaje, that is in Spanish. Normally all the interviews and the talks are set in Spanish, but as I moved to New Zealand, I decided that I will also introduce new talks with people that inspires me, and everything here is in English, so I decided to open the language also to English in this channel. And in this opportunity, I'm very grateful to have one person that inspires me a lot, and her name is Anila. Anila, thank you very much for being here in the channel. And we are in a Buddhist center in Auckland, New Zealand. And this center was settled down by Traleg Kyabon Rinpoche, who was a Tibetan Buddhist lama. But unfortunately, he passed away in 2012. So, Anila, I don't know if you can present yourself, please.
Right, so my name is JangChub Lhamo, and I am a Buddhist nun in the Tibetan tradition, and I am the caretaker of Traleg Rinpoche's Auckland Centre. And as Natalia has indicated, Rinpoche passed away in 2012, and because of that, I have been left with the responsibility of upholding the Buddha Dharma in place of Rinpoche's physical presence. So through the constant insistence of Natalia, I have reluctantly said yes to this very short conversation on a topic that I am totally unaware of, but obviously Natalia will give a lead into what we're going to look at today.
Okay,
Thank you.
Anila, I'm new in the Buddhist tradition, the Buddhist view. And for me, all the concepts about suffering are nearly new also. And I would like to start with what is suffering in the Buddhist view and what's the purpose of suffering?
Okay, so suffering is taken very seriously in Buddhism. And you could say in some sense it is not in spite of suffering, but actually because of suffering that there is actually a spiritual path. Suffering is all pervasive and extremely universal. There is always some sense of dissatisfaction, some sense of anxiety or tension that is always the undercurrent of our existence. Suffering, because it is so pervasive, the Sanskrit word refers to suffering as dukkha, and the bad news is that suffering is endemic to the human nature. And the good news, of course, is that because of suffering, we enter the spiritual path. To understand how suffering comes about is to really develop insight into our personality, into our makeup, into our attitude. Quite often people tend to think that suffering is because of impermanence, or because things are insubstantial, because things are transient, because things don't remain. But it actually has nothing to do with any of those. Suffering really exists because we attach ourselves to impermanence. We seek eternal happiness on impermanent substance. But the very aspect of impermanence is that it is always passing by. So long as you are very connected to grasping on to the type of figure that you have, the age that you have, the intellect that you have, the boyfriend that you have, your vegetarian aspects, your social engagement, they change. because we do not relinquish and we do not see change as the fundamental aspect of existence, we hold. Once you hold, you are doomed, because you are trying to get maximum comfort out of insubstantial aspects. So you are always grasping outwardly, trying to acquire, so the mind becomes acquisitional, and so therefore it does not tend to look within. It is always looking outwardly to be satisfied. And as you know, desires are never satisfied. No sooner do you acquire something, then you need to acquire something else, then something else. So it's quite a tiring state of mind to be in, constantly needing, wanting, having to have that which is permanently impermanent. So maybe it's the way we look at phenomena through an uneducated mindset, through ignorance or avidya in Sanskrit, that we have this melody of suffering.
But desire is part of the human existence.
I think Buddhism makes a distinction between desire and excessive desire. And that's really the simple difference. Of course, you can want to have good health, to have good relationships, to have good jobs. There's absolutely, Buddhism does not even look at that as being contradictory to human existence. And then you have excessive, fixated, conditioned, compulsive, exaggerated forms of desire. And it's the excessive forms of desire which is the problem, not desire in itself.
Yeah. And it's curious because Traleg Rinpoche was focused on bringing all these Buddhist sacred teachings to Western people. And as we would talk before, Western people is nearly new in the Buddhist perspective, and we are integrating aspects from the meditative states like mindfulness. And my curiosity is about Buddhism speaks about enlightenment, and for Western people like me, enlightenment is one state, like nirvana state. But my question always is like around how to attain enlightenment in these times that there's nearly more difficult than before. A lot of stimulus, a lot of things to be attached, or healthy, money, success in job. What do you think about that?
Well, when you look at enlightenment, that is very, very, very much a long distant goal. The immediate goal is to be happy, because if you are unhappy, there's not much of a probability that you will attain an enlightened state, because you are battling so much with the claustrophobic aspects of mind. So the immediate goal is to be happy, and the thing is, how do you become happy or a happier person? So although we look at enlightenment as the numero uno, the pinnacle of practice, it is a goal that we aim for, but the stepping stone into it is the development of happiness. Happiness that is not contingent or dependent on outer form, because that comes and goes. You can be 12 and you have a viewpoint from the perspective of a 12-year-old. You are 30, you are not the same person that you were when you were 12. You are 80, you can barely get off the couch anymore. So happiness is really dependent upon how you relate to suffering, and more importantly, how you relate to phenomena. We are of the age that, or you are more of the age, that you are uncomfortable with being uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And that there in itself is a problem, because it is only an attitude that you have that deciphers certain material conditions as being uncomfortable. Generally, you can see this in students that may be learning meditation, or students very, very new. They have tried everything else. They've tried yoga, they've tried a series of apps, they've gone to a series of different talks, and so now Buddhism generally is the last on the list. So they enter a center. They would usually aim towards sitting on a chair before moving towards a cushion, because their main fundamental aspect of thought is not to be uncomfortable. So therefore you, myself, have no direct, immediate experience with being uncomfortable, because we spend the vast majority of our life pushing any uncomfortable state away. So because we do not have direct contact with that particular phenomena, we have no way of engaging with it. So we develop a life of separation. Me, how I feel, what I want, what my aims are, where I'm going, and then everything outside of the me, the precious me, becomes a problem. So we spend a vast amount of time ensuring that the me feels good. So therefore the mind is divided. It is never unified state. It is always at war with the me and the other. And so the meditative path enables the person to become in direct contact through meditation with everything that arises in the mind. And generally people don't like what arises in the mind. So the first thing that will happen is meditation will go. Anything that is difficult, anything that is a struggle, that does not aim to magnify the ego of the self, is discarded. And so because we have this throwaway habit, we have no interest whatsoever in meditation unless it's on an app, and it can give us a direct experience of feeling a little bit okay. But a little bit okay changes and goes, so you're no further along in your practice than you were before. You're best to stay at home and watch a movie. Would be more relaxing. You know.
Definitely. And I think, at least in my experience, that ability, you always told to me, like, it's a habit, and it takes time to change a habit. But it's difficult because as our mind, maybe more in Western than the East, is settled in a way that we want the ultimate goal as much as possible, as soon as possible. And how can we integrate that perseverance and patience about the pathway in meditation? That it's well known in West meditation, but we want now, feeling better urgently.
That's impossible. That's impossible. If you have cancer, you go into treatment. You have medication, you have chemotherapy, you have radiation. It is a long haul. If you wish to be a lawyer, you enroll in university or secondary tertiary education, you study for X amount of years. It's a long haul. If you are going to be a astronaut, same conditions, innumerable amounts of study, physics, anatomy. It's a long haul. So there is an unusual mindset that when you come to meditation, you're supposed to just get it. It's an extremely long haul. Therefore, you would need to have some sense of value, to place some sense of value, significance, importance on the meditative aspect of mind, because you cannot have a result without practice and study. And generally, if you went to see a lama and you were interested in the path, the first thing you would be in contact with is study, because the mind cannot train itself without understanding the mind. To understand the mind, there is study. And so the more one studies, the more one contemplates, the more one practices, the different layers of obstacles of the mind, they begin to naturally dissolve of their own accord. If you have a child and it is struggling with math, it struggles because it does not understand. If you introduce the child to a tutor or to a way of looking at it, and a better scope of understanding is attained, they move further through the problem of the math. So it is unusual that people feel in this day and age that meditation is something that they can do all by themselves through an app. Meditation is the transformation of mind through the arduous skill and accomplishment of great masters that have gone before us, that have written down their realization and handed that realization through to teacher to student, to teacher to student, in a successive unbroken lineage going back 2,600 years to the time of the Buddha. So to think that we can get it just like that, you have to understand that the melody of the mind is diseased in some sense. It might not be a good word, but you have to ingest Buddha Dharma gradually, because it's not a quick fix solution. You have a mind that is stuffed, that is conditioned, that is constantly regurgitating the same feelings, the same thoughts, the same nothing has changed. So in order for transformation to take place, you would need to ingest the medicine for chronic illness little bit at a time. But of course people have no patience. That's why you get an app.
Yeah.
You just do an app, as if that will make everything better.
But is there any possibility to develop being free of suffering without a teacher, by ourselves?
Well, I think naturally, with YouTube, and with the dynamics of this type of technology, you come in direct contact with something. And then it's really up to your own karmic history, I suppose, your karmic connection, whether you follow through with that first initial contact, on YouTube or whatever. If there's something that arouses your curiosity that may take you or lead you to a Buddhist center where you are then engaged in practice, and where someone hopefully is guiding you through the steps of meditation, whether it is calming meditation like shamatha, whether it is the more analytical approach to meditation like vipassana, or lakto in Tibetan, which means to see clearly. What are you seeing clearly? Phenomena, the thing that you don't normally see at all. You see, we see form as solid, so we have no interest in dissecting and taking form apart in order to discover that there's no essential essence or quality to what exists. It is literally a collection, as Rinpoche would say, a collection of tendencies. So the self seems to be the big instigator of suffering. And usually what we are instructed to do when you're studying particular things such as Mahamudra is to first go in search of the self. We look all over the place to find it, only to discover that it only exists in context, doesn't exist as a fundamental, non-changing, solid thing. This comes through study, you see. When you look at Buddha Dharma or Buddhist teachings, they are referred to as wisdom teachings. It's not our wisdom. But in order to awaken innate wisdom, you need to awake it through education of mind. And so whereas meditation is something that people probably haphazardly just pick up, because now medical research is indicating that through meditation it lessens anxiety, through meditation it lessens blood pressure problems, through it. So people say it's legitimately proven. But generally people want the goods without the trappings of Buddhism. But the goods are contained within the Buddhist teachings. But generally people go, give me that, but don't give me that. So therefore you take things out of context, and you are only being satisfied by something so minute. It may have a little bit of change, but the transformative aspect of the full treatment for recovery is left out. And so that is a problem, I think.
But may I study by myself with my mind?
Well, the thing is, you need someone.
If I see everything with my mind,
yes.
How can I
study?
That's
a bit of a problem. That's right. That's right, because you see things through your viewpoint. You see things through your educational background. You see things through your cultural perspective. You see things from your economical perspective. See things from your academic perspective. So you have all of these things floating around, and depending on how you feel, you see it from that particular viewpoint. But Buddhism doesn't totally look at it from that. First of all, there has to be some sense of calm. The mind has to rest enough for you to look into it. Now, if you're not resting the mind, you're overpacking and you're putting a lot of detail into the mind, and so therefore thoughts are combustive. Thoughts come, they go, they stay, they mingle, they intermingle. So therefore you're always looking at something through a concept. So you don't actually have direct contact to the nature of your mind. You only have concept, you know. So you are overworking the intellectual side, but you have no interest in the spiritual side.
Yeah, I think that's a quality of Western society, probably. Yes. Like acquiring, getting more information.
That's right.
Is there any possibility to attain enlightenment, like in the sense that being free of suffering without meditation?
Well, from a Buddhist perspective, that's highly unlikely, because the mind is always moving. Meditation allows you to see the mind. How do you see the mind? When you're in a river and you're drowning. When you're in a river and you're drowning, you're grabbing onto everything. And that's what the mind usually does, that's untrained. It grabs everything and anything, you know, that passes it. It interprets, it reads everything and anything into everything. It's like a couple are together, boyfriend and girlfriend. They decide to break off because he decides he's found something different. He goes to Piha Beach and is in the sun, and the girlfriend is somewhere crying her eyes out. His sense of reality is totally different to hers. So we always are interpreting things in relationship to our own mental schemas, you see. So the mind is constantly bombarded by acquisitional tendencies of needing, wanting, and having to have. So therefore the mind is never at a state of rest that allows you to simply see things as they are. It's always buying into things that arise in the mind as being something independently existing, you know. So therefore we're always relating to things independently existing without any understanding of how to relate to phenomena as it is. And so I think that that is why, from the Buddhist point of view, there is no one to save us. We will have to save ourselves. And what that means is a lot of work, because we live in between the eternalistic view that someone is going to be there to save you, and the nihilistic point of view that nothing exists except matter. So one takes away from reality and one adds on to reality. Buddhist view is in the middle between those two extreme points of view. So as you can see, even from my perspective, there is a lot of study and practice that needs to come together. So if you're only working the intelligent muscle, then the other muscle is going to suffer, you know. So we seek to understand suffering in all of its pervasive aspects in order to understand things as they are, not as we want them to be. So, you know, so that's a little bit about it, I think.
And I'm wondering how to start if I live, like, I don't know, in Peru, in South America, and I have a job from 8 a.m. to 5 p.m., then coming back home. I have 3 kids, and then duties on home. How to start at least to have a happy life if I'm suffering, I mean, like with my life?
I think maybe a simple aspect of that is to be attentive. While you are in the middle of something, pay attention to how your body is, to how your hands move, to how you are relating to whatever you are in contact, to not divide the attentive aspect from the swirling mind stream that is constantly upheaving everything. Be at least a little bit focused on what you're doing, and that will allow the mind to relax, because you're giving the mind too many things to do. You're trying to do that. You think, for some reason, we have this tendency to think if you're doing many things and if you're moving very fast, it's a problem. It's not a problem. The problem is that you lack awareness of the things that you are doing. You just charge through everything like a bull in a china shop without any sense of awareness or mindful engagement as to what you are doing. That sense of panic attack tends to come about because the mind is diffused and scattered. When you bring it all together, there's no real form of attack. Attack comes because we are vulnerable by the sheer aspect of engaging or trying to engage in many, many things. Sometimes you hear the expression, women are very good because they can multitask. There's nothing good in multitasking. It causes a lot of anxiety, a lot of tension. So there's no freedom. That is not a good thing. But we seem to think that by doing so many things, but to do many things without even being present at what we're doing creates tension in the mind. So I think that irrespective if you have 17 children, a farm and hundreds of cows to milk, if you can bring the mind to that particular point and engage with whatever it is that you are doing, you rest the mind. Like, quite often people have never really drunken tea or water or coffee or milk or vodka. As soon as you pick up your vodka and you begin to drink, you're never with the vodka. You're with, am I going to be late? What happened to my thing? Should I do a text? So you're never there. Maybe you just drink the vodka. You look at your hands, you look at the taste, you bring the glass, you stay. If you can remain, you have little bit tamed the mind. If you're going, she's late, where is she, what am I going to do? Did I park my car? Should I go to you never are even drinking the tea. You never experience anything. It's so flighty, you see. So because you never experience, then the mind's always charging and running and grabbing. It's quite futile, and you repeat the same thing. So, so maybe just remain for a little bit with whatever it is you're engaged in.
And what you say could mean that we treat ourselves first in a compassionate way.
That's right. I mean, you're the only you that you have. So you're the only you that you have. And from a Buddhist perspective, we never look at changing the me. There's nothing wrong with the me. The problem is that we think the me is this one particular way. You know, we are incompassionate people, we are kind people, we are fidgety people, we are all those things. But for some particular reason, we want to discard all the things that we feel are negative. We only want to collect. But the reality is that all of those strains of me come from the one mind. So if everything comes from the nature of this mind, then there's nothing that needs to be discarded. There's nothing that needs to be brought in. Everything is perfect and complete and existing in the way that it should be. You see, it's just us that deny that point. You see, always wanting to give something away. You know, I'm not quite sure why we want to do that, because everything that comes and goes has the same nature. So therefore you should be comfortable with all the different things that you are, because you're not one particular thing. Wanting to be a certain way, to be a particular person, or being needed to be seen as a particular person, it is not logical. You may want to be perceived this way in one's 20s, and then all of a sudden you don't like it when you're 80. Because you're always used to giving everything away that you don't like. So you have no relationship with the you that you are. So maybe you need to just look at it that way, I think.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm very touched with the things you mentioned,
Yes.
especially because it's my perception of the world,
Yes.
that we wanted to be happy and discard the negative part.
Yes.
Of everything, of the reality of myself and of the other person in front of me. And I think this conversation will be useful for all, especially for people that is being introduced into a healing path, or maybe being
Yes.
wants to be free from suffering.
Yes.
And I don't know if you have any last recommendation for especially the younger generation that is like more connected with all these
Yes.
with
I think
connections.
From what I see, the younger generation overthinks, because it needs and it wants, and it has to have it now. And that can't be satisfied. But it always is overthinking, over-amplifying. And that's a problem. So I think the thing is to let go of some aspect of that in order to soften the impact of the thoughts that we have. But it's a very fast-moving world, and looking at society and looking at technological breakthroughs, we are extremely advanced. There's no doubt. But why is it that although technology and there are a series of advancements, why has the human condition gone backwards? Depression, anxiety, tension, why has it gone backwards? Because technology cannot satisfy the mind. So therefore you can't move into happier states if you think your happier states are dependent upon what you have, what you want, what you need. It's impossible. And so technology moves forward and human condition continues to suffer. Everyone suffers, whether you're impatient, whether you're anxious, whether you want size 8 and you're size 22, everybody suffers. Whether you're late for a meeting, you suffer. Whether your child was once a Rhodes Scholar and then and you had an incredible sense of pride. Pride is also acquisitional. You turn around to discover that the Rhodes Scholar is on heavy aspects of meth and now has no job, so your pride also is relinquished at the same time. So the thing is, you have to understand how the mind works, and people generally are not interested in how the mind works. People seem to have a view that Buddhism is about vegetarianism, compassion, meditation. Buddhism is about the mind. They are secondary components, non-harming. They're secondary components. You know, Jack the Ripper had a particular mind. So because he had a particular attitude, a particular mindset, he did atrocious things. Hitler had a great personality, commanded a great allegiance, had a particular mind. So you need to pay attention to the mind, because it's the mind that orchestrates and dictates and perceives our reality. But it is not easy. So I can understand why people are more content to maybe go to do yoga, then do a little bit of meditation, do a little bit of meditation before you eat your yogurt and muesli, then do a little bit of yoga. So meditation has slipped into this. Meditation is not overly seen as a practice. It's more about the alleviation of some little bit of stress. Then you get off the cushion, go back into stress. Quickly come back to the cushion, de-stress, go back, have more stress. So you see, it's not working. No relationship to mind, just wanting to escape all the problems that we have, but you can't escape it, you see, without understanding how the mind works. So maybe it's the treatment of not understanding how the mind works creates the suffering. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you to Traleg Rinpoche.
Yes, thank you to Rinpoche.
Thank
really.
you, Buddha, also.
And thank you to that Buddha.
Thank you very much.
Okay, Natalia, lovely. Thank you very much. I appreciated being here and taking up some of your time. Thank you.
Bye.